guys, I'm here today with my wrap up for March with a little hint of February. This is where I showcase all the books that I've managed to read in March, as well as right at the end of February. I ended up reading a lot more than I expected to, which is really great because I actually managed to find quite a few gems this month. So, without further ado, let's get to it. The first book on my list is The Host by Stephanie Meyer. This turned out to be a lot better than I expected it to be. Going in, I expected it to be a little bit more mediocre, but I was pleasantly surprised. It is a sci-fi novel set in the world where aliens have invaded and taken over the world completely, but groups of humans do exist, but scattered far and few in between. We see the story through Wanderer, an invading soul, and Melanie, her host body. I found it very interesting to see the story from both of their perspectives, as they're basically both stuck in one body fighting for existence and fighting for space. I mean, I think that would be a little bit weird having someone inside your mind constantly. It would be a nightmare. They are both very different in the beginning, but as the story goes on, they influence and affect each other, so that by the end of the book, they actually become friends instead of enemies. I really found their friendship to be quite amazing to follow. There were a lot of other great characters, especially Jebediah. He is basically the crazy uncle that no one ever really believed or ever cared about, but as it turns out, he was actually not so crazy after all. Food for thought, perhaps. Overall, all the characters were very well developed and I enjoyed the exploration of humanity. Basically, how humans sort of deal with the end of the world, trying to rebuild society and all these things. It is interesting to see how these things can make humans very cruel, but sometimes a sliver of humanity and compassion can still survive. As for the writing, I loved the blend of first person and past tense. I found this to be a lot easier to read than most first person books, especially with young adults. Mainly because they're always set in first person but present tense. I don't know what it is about this that actually bugs me, it's just generally irksome. It's kind of like that random pet peeve that you just can't explain no matter how much you want to. But yeah, at the end of the day I really enjoyed this book. The plot was a bit slow, but the constant feeling of death and fear of death kind of keeps it suspenseful and interesting. Especially when the humans are basically trying to decide what to do with this Melanie Wanderer type person. They can't really tell, is she human, isn't she? I do definitely recommend this book, especially if you enjoy sci-fi and aliens and even exploring people's feelings. I ended up giving this one a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I picked up was Cinder by Marissa Meyer. This story is set in the new Beijing, and it loosely follows the story of Cinderella with a unique twist. It is book 1 in the Lunar Chronicle series. The rest of the books that follow each feature a new fairy tale and I'm really excited to carry on with it. I loved the writing and the characters, especially Eco. In fact, I actually nominate her to be my favourite character for the month of March. I wish I could actually draw her out of this world and just bring her into my house. I would never have another dull moment. Now I won't say much more on this because I have actually posted a review on it already, so I'll leave a link to that down below, but I highly recommend this series, especially if you love fairy tales. I gave this one a 5 out of 5 on Goodreads, mainly because with Goodreads you don't really get an option of in-between stars, so it deserves a 5 out of 5, maybe about a 4.7, 4.8, but either way it was really great. The next book I picked up was Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan. This story basically follows Percy Jackson as he finds out that he is actually a demigod. As if that's not enough, more than half the guards around actually want to see him fry. It is a lovely adventure type book that follows him and his friends through a series of crazy tasks. And I really enjoyed it. I'll be honest, when I first picked this up, I actually had no idea that it was middle grade. I can't even actually remember the last time I read anything to do with middle grade fiction. But I think that was the movie's fault because I watched that first and the actors in the movie, they really don't look like they're in 6th grade. So I blame the movie for this. Because of this, at first I was a little bit unsure about it, but I read it and I absolutely adored it. It was cute, adorable, and full of action. There's never a dull moment in this book. The characters were really well drawn up and they work together very nicely. Plus, it involves Greek mythology. How can you not love something that involves Greek mythology? So I definitely recommend this one, even if you don't usually read middle grade fiction, it's still brilliant. So for this one, I ended up giving it 4 stars. The next 2 books I picked up was Throne of Glass and Crown of Midnight by Sarah J. Maas. The story follows Selena, who is a trained assassin, who is ironically not that cold-hearted, despite the preconception of assassins. Who would have figured? She basically has to win her freedom after being caught for her crimes, and if she is successful, then she will become the king's champion, which pretty much leads to all kinds of disasters. There's no end. It is high fantasy and it's an absolutely amazing read. I couldn't put it down once I started. Both of these books were just that good. So I pretty much marathoned the series. I have already reviewed Throne of Glass, so I'll leave a link to that down below. As for Kind of Midnight, I will be posting a review soon, so I will say more about that then. The characters were also quirky and very interesting, plus it's set in the King's Court in the olden days style, which I absolutely love. Any book that has that in it it's a win for me. So I gave this one 4 and 4.5 stars respectively. The next book I got to was Divergent by Veronica Roth. I actually did start this book about a year ago, but it didn't really grip me the first time around, so I put it down. But now I picked it up again. This is a dystopian novel set in rundown Chicago, and it follows a girl named Tris. In this world, everyone is divided into 5 factions, depending on which traits they possess the strongest. So the story basically follows Tris as she chooses which one of these factions to spend the rest of her life in. I would say most of this book is more introductory than anything else. There isn't a lot of action at all, until the end of the book at least. There were a lot of sad moments towards the end, which kind of made me want to cry quite a bit. But overall, I found it to be a nice and steady build-up. It wasn't rushed and it wasn't too slow either. The first time I picked this book up and put it down, it wasn't necessarily because the story was actually boring or anything. The story is actually amazing. I really do love it. It was actually just because it was set in first person. At the time, it kind of made me go, meh. But I got over it and I read it, and I'm glad that I did. The world is drawn up wonderfully, and there are a lot of fun and interesting characters, and how they interact is always very interesting, especially in such a brutal world. I did watch the movie first, which I really kind of wish I didn't, because it sort of spoiled the end of the book for me, and it's part of the reason why I wasn't as happy with the book as I could have been. I think that if I hadn't actually watched the movie, then it would have been amazing, whereas now it's more sort of just under amazing, but pretty close. I was actually quite surprised as well that I didn't end up hating the movie completely after reading the book. Because usually when you get a book and adapt it to the movie is usually just dire. It's horrible, they always get everything wrong, but surprisingly they actually did a fairly good job this time, so good on them. I'm very keen to read Insurgent now and carry on with the series, especially before watching the Insurgent movie. So hopefully I'll actually read Insurgent this month. I plan to, one way to find out if it'll work or not. So at the end of the day, I ended up giving this book a 4 out of 5 stars. The last book I picked up in March was Roverandom by Tolkien. This book I absolutely adored. It was brilliant. Anything written by Tolkien is pretty much guaranteed to be great. It is really short, it was only about 5 chapters long, so it only took about say 2-3 hours to read. But it was definitely worth the time. It was published after his death, so it's sort of an incomplete story. Not in the sense that it doesn't have an end, but it wasn't really made and perfected for publishing, so there are a few tiny little holes, but it's easily still amazing. The pages are simply dripping with imagination. I've yet to find another author that has such a way with words. His use of language is just impeccable. It is a children's story, so it is definitely aimed at younger audiences, but even so, I still loved it. I pretty much wish I was a child again, just so that I could read it through a child's eyes. I wish I had grown up with things like this, it would have been amazing. The story itself follows a dog named Rover who annoys a wizard and pretty much gets turned into a toy because of that. He then goes exploring to the moon and even lives under the sea for a while, and it's brilliantly entertaining. It is a very humorous book and I would highly recommend it. If you have a younger sibling that enjoys stories, or a child, or even if you want to read it yourself, why not? So this book I'll end up giving 5 out of 5 stars, which it absolutely deserves. Tolkien will never get anything less. And that pretty much brings an end to this video. I hope you enjoyed. Leave a like and subscribe if you did, and comment down below. Have you read any of these books? If so, what did you think of them? Also, what have you read in the month of March? Until next time, bye!